Bob McCoskrie from Family First. Bob, kia ora. Nice to see you again.
Drew, good morning to you.
A couple of stories that wanting to focus on today. Firstly, both here in New Zealand and around the world, trends about who believes in God, who's attending church. It's a little bit of a mixed bag, some good news, bad news. What do you make of it, Bob?
Yeah, so this is the Pew Research Centre. So basically they look around the world. They have looked at 2,700 censuses and surveys. And basically what they've found is that the global population of Christianity has grown by just over 120 million
Wow.
between 2010 to 2020. So we're up to 2.3 billion in the world. Now, global population is 7.8 billion, so that means that Christians are 28.8%. So, close to 1 in 3.
Yeah.
But the overall figure, interestingly, since 2020, it's fallen by 2%. Now, on the other hand, the global population of Muslims has reached 2 billion, and so they're catching up. But it's been a big increase, 347 million. So so Christianity has decreased by 1.8%. Muslim have increased by 1.8%. You'd think, oh, okay, they're just walking out of the church into the mosque. No, they're not. What it actually shows is that a lot of Christians, for every 3.1 that have left, for every one joined a church. So the church is losing 3.1 on average and gaining 1. Now, the poll, Pew Research says that the biggest driver of the decline in the share of Christians was religious disaffiliation. In other words, they weren't changing religions, they were simply walking away from the faith.
Yep.
And you actually see that in New Zealand statistics. So in the latest census, for the first time, New Zealand it's one of 3 countries, Netherlands, Uruguay, and New Zealand, where people who say they have no religion are in the majority.
Okay.
And so New Zealand is now at 51%. It's the first census. 2013, 2018, it was the minority, but now it's 51%. So it's not a good trend. And we joined China, North Korea, Czech Republic, Hong Kong, Vietnam, Macau, and Japan, which already had unreligious affiliations.
You don't want to be on the same list as North Korea for anything, honestly.
I don't think so, or China.
That's not a good sign. However, the church is growing in some parts of the world, but certainly not here in New Zealand. Having said that, though, Bob, do you think that this is a little bit of, the nominals just can't be bothered going to church on a Sunday morning rather than there being a collapse of faith? Because also anecdotally, we hear about great things that God is doing through the church in New Zealand.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. I mean, I think that's the big question. Are you losing people who might simply term themselves as cultural Christians?
Yeah.
And Andrew, as we said before we came on air, we were mulling over our childhood. And of course, in the culture at that time, religion and Christianity was still very much. I mean, schools used to pray and they used to sing hymns at assemblies. Shops would shut down on Sundays. So the culture and Christianity were walking hand in hand. So if you're a cultural Christian where you're not actively in your faith, but you still say you're a Christian because it's part of the culture. Now we've got a new cultural religion, which is at odds and at competition with Christianity and Christian values. And so therefore a lot of people are saying, okay, well, no, my culture and my Christian aren't similar anymore. So I'm going to either follow the culture or I'm going to follow Christianity. So look, I guess in a rough kind of way, we might be weeding out the ones who are not hanging in. The parable of the sower comes to mind.
Exactly. Some
about
falls on
rocky
stony ground. Yeah, exactly. There are some positive things happening in different parts of the world, as I mentioned, though it's not all doom and gloom. And something which I find quite remarkable is the way in which there's a general recognition of the impact of Christianity as the foundation stone of Western civilization. Some exciting things happening there, and God is still moving. So watch this space in that regard.
And I think the other thing, Andrew, is that the Africas and the South Americas had very large growth, but that was offset by the quite significant drop in Europe and partly in the United States.
Yeah, no, certainly. The other issue that I wanted to talk about today is, well, it's a tragic case of a young person who was isolated from their family and their community, and well, was impacted by body dysmorphia and anorexia, and died alone of starvation. Absolutely awful situation here, Bob.
Yeah, and it was covered by Radio New Zealand, and then it was picked up by, sort of syndicated by the other mainstream media. So they all covered it, Stuff, One News, New Zealand Herald.
Yep.
And it was the parents telling the story of how the daughter not only wanted to identify as a boy, but also struggled with anorexia nervosa severely. In fact, was put under a sort of state watch, as you call it,
Yep.
to force her to have treatment. And now, when we're talking about someone here, Andrew, we need to clarify that we are talking about someone who started having the problem around 11, 12.
Yep.
And then when they were 15, 16, they were allowed to leave home, and she had just turned 17 when she died,
Wow.
living alone in emergency accommodation. And she's living alone not only with the issue of anorexia nervosa, but also gender confusion, but also they diagnosed she had autism. She also had child trauma experience.
Yeah.
So there was OCD. So there was, and that's what we find with these cases, is that often it's not just the gender confusion that's the issue, it's the comorbid disorders that are running alongside. Now, the reason that I think this story is important, Andrew, is because I have interviewed recently a couple of detransitioners in New Zealand, and of course I've interviewed Chloe Cole from the United States, and there's also a woman, Mel, and I can't remember her surname, from Australia, who spoke at a conference in New Zealand last year. And what was reported in this Radio New Zealand story about this teen dying alone, this just turned 17-year-old, it's all the same. It's all consistent. It's all about the fact that the authorities and the health bodies and education people, they focus on simply affirming the gender rather than dealing with the comorbid disorders. And so, it's about healing. It's not about healing the whole mind. It's actually buying into the ideology of the young person. It's very sad. But unfortunately, those who want to push this kind of ideology have now come out and are attacking the parents.
Wow. And
sadly have released some posts that this vulnerable teenager has made on a kind of a group chat for pro-anorexia. My understanding is pro-anorexia chat groups, and they've released them to kind of make out, it's the parents that are the mongrels. It's disgraceful action by David Farrier and a guy called Paul Thistle, who's an activist in Wellington. So, it's a very sad case. And basically what they're saying is it was the anorexia that was ultimately took her life, but it was a lack of care by all the agencies to actually focus on healing the mind.
Bob, in terms of your research, and I know this is something you've looked into a bit, and with the interviews that you've done with various people on this, is there sometimes, in this case, an obvious overlap between body dysmorphia and gender dysphoria? Is that more often than people would realize? In fact, you've got a situation where somebody who is dangerously thin looks in the mirror and sees a fat person. There is, and then you've got the other distortion of reality, in that somebody who is born one gender feels within themselves that they are the other. There's something broken in both of these scenarios. Is there a connection in your view?
Well, when you think about that example, of course, you've got a young, vulnerable person who is not only rejecting the physical aspect of needing food, but they're rejecting the physical attributes of their biology, of what they were born in. So exactly the same. And this is my challenge that I often give to even amongst Christendom, which says that we should affirm the gender change, the transgender, is that I say, well, in the example of anorexia nervosa, do we go to them and say, okay, well, if you want to identify as anorexia nervosa, we're going to give you weight loss pills. We're going to book you in for liposuction.
Yeah.
And, we're going to affirm you in your skinniness to the point of almost, it could kill you.
Yeah.
And yet when someone turns up and says, well, actually, I think I've been born in the wrong body and I should be the other sex, suddenly all the agencies and all the narrative and even the law, the conversion therapy ban law, says you have to affirm that and you have to start offering chemicalization and castration and confusion. And it actually shows the anomaly of the way we treat the two. In both cases, we shouldn't be cutting the body. We should be healing the mind.
Just such a tragic situation indeed, and confused young people not getting the support that they need at the heart of all of this. Bob, thank you for your insight and your wisdom on this. Those interviews that you talked about that you've done recently, they're available to watch, or is that coming up shortly?
They are coming up. They're part of our upcoming conference in August, forumonthefamily.nz.
Okay, looking forward to that. Bob, thanks very much for being on the program today.
Thanks, Andrew. Have a good day.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.